Today we're going to talk about the addition property of equality. This property states that if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. If we have a general equation, A equals B, A representing the left-hand side and B representing the right-hand side, we know that A is equal to B because that's what an equation is, two things that are equal to each other. Then if we decide to add the same number, in this case C, to both sides of the equation, then the equation is still going to be equal. You can think of it like a scale. If the scale is balanced because we have A and B on both sides of the scale, and we decide to add something else to both sides, in this case C, the scale is still going to be balanced because we added the same amount to both sides of the scale. So with equations, if you add the same number to both sides of the equation, it's still going to be equal and balanced. Let's take a look at this first example. X minus 3 equals negative 5. When we solve equations, the goal is to get the variable, in this case x, by itself. But we have a minus 3 attached to that x. To undo subtraction, we want to use addition since they're opposites. So we want to add something to the left-hand side of the equation. But thinking back to our property, whatever we add to the left-hand side, we also have to add to the right-hand side to keep the equation balanced and true. Since we're subtracting a 3, to undo the subtraction of a 3, we already said we're going to add, but we want to add the same number that we subtracted, in this case 3. And so we're going to add that 3 to both sides. Now we can go ahead and simplify. If it helps, you can draw a line to separate both sides of your equation. X minus 3 plus 3 is just going to leave us with x, because a minus 3 and then a plus 3 cancel out and give us 0. And then we have a negative 5 plus 3, which gets us negative 2. So now that we've gotten the variable by itself, we have solved the equation, x equals negative 2. But just in case you're ever unsure, you can always go ahead and check your answer. So what you want to do is rewrite the original equation. So x minus 3 equals negative 5. But since we found that x equals negative 2, we can, instead of writing x, write a negative 2 because we know they're equal. Everything else in the equation will stay the same. Now we can go ahead and simplify it as much as we can. So we have negative 2 minus 3, which gets us negative 5. We do know that negative 5 is equal to negative 5, so we have a true statement, which means that x equals negative 2 was the solution to the equation x minus 3 equals negative 5. This next example may look a little bit different than the first example, but we're still applying the same concepts. We have 0 equals negative 4 plus r. Instead of subtracting, we're adding a negative, in this case negative 4. When you're adding a negative number, we're still going to add something to both sides, because positive numbers and negative numbers are opposites. So in this case, we want to add the same number, 4, to both sides. A negative 4 and a positive 4, when you add those together, are going to cancel each other out. If you need to, you can go ahead and draw a line to separate the left-hand side from the right-hand side. We can then simplify both sides. The left-hand side, 0 plus 4, will just get us 4. And then negative 4 plus a positive 4 gets us 0, just leaving us with r on the right-hand side. So we have 4 equals r. Since the variable is by itself, then we solved the equation. If you want to, you can write it with the variable on the left-hand side. These mean the same thing. Again, if you feel like you want to check your answer, especially if you have a more complex equation, you can always rewrite the equation and then take the answer you found, in this case r equals 4, and substitute it in for the variable. Everything else will be the same. Then we can simplify. -4 plus 4 is going to get us 0, and yes, we know that 0 is equal to 0. So we now know that the answer we found, r equals 4, is the correct solution to the equation. To sum up the addition property of equality, anytime we have an equation, if we want to keep the equation balanced, if we add something to one side of the equation, we must also add that same number to the other side of the equation. And that is the addition property of equality.